It's no secret that Shadow of the Colossus, arguably the most important game of the 6th generation of consoles, is a very sad game. Extremely sad. Almost nobody comes out of this game with a happy ending, including the player, and the merits of its meaning, the lessons it teaches, and the lore behind the game are continually debated to this day. But I'm not here to talk about most of that, nor is any of that the focus of today's video. No, I'm here to talk about my depression. Fun, right? Trust me, I'll keep this video as easygoing and lighthearted as I can, but I'm going to touch upon a lot of heavy subjects in this video, as well as spoilers for the game as a whole. And seeing as how the remake is just around the corner, I can't for a second blame you if you decide to turn the video off and stop watching now. Seriously, if you don't want to watch a video that talks about depression, or any of the story or gameplay elements of Shadow of the Colossus, turn this off. It's okay. For those of you who want to stick around and see what I have to say though, strap in, because this is going to be a long one. About 4 years ago, I said the following in a video where I named Shadow of the Colossus my second favorite video game of all time. While I knew the game was epic, for lack of a better term, with a grand score, a daunting premise, and a revolutionary style to it, I didn't expect it to have quite the impact it did. This game on its own taught me how beautiful the world is. The exploration in the Colossi themselves, although entirely fictional, were not without comparison to the real world. These things I wanted to be alive to experience for myself. This game saved my life. And that's not all. Okay, right off the bat, this was definitely a bit hyperbolic, but the core of what I said still rings true. Growing up, I suffered from both depression and anxiety to a pretty severe degree, and both of these things greatly affected me, especially in my junior high and high school years. Both chronic and, yeah, I took about every medication every doctor could prescribe me. The best part about that is, I can't really think of a time where any of that helped. I never felt safe in my own head or secure with my own well-being. The only change was that, depending on what I was taking, I got better at hiding it from the people I cared about. After high school, I can't say if it was taking on a full-time job and the distractions that came with that, but all of it mostly went away. My anxiety was a bit more persistent, but over time, I felt pretty happy, cool, collected, and confident. Sure, anxiety attacks were a thing, but they were so much more infrequent. And depression? Well, I didn't feel any of it. Most of the time, anyway. Around January or February of every year, and hey, that's when this video is going up, that depression would hit me again, and it wouldn't leave. Granted, at this point, I was off the meds, off the treatment, because most of the time I didn't need it. But when it returned, it hit me hard. And then it went away again. My depression had returned in the form of seasonal depression, which I'll be honest is easier to deal with than the chronic year-round sadness I used to feel, but no amount of meds could fight this off either. And over the years, it's just become something I've accepted. January rolls around and oh, what's that? All the self-doubt and loathing is here to say hi? Great. You know what that means? I need to play Shadow of the Colossus again. I know. I've already beaten it several dozen times, but I know it will help. Will it make me feel less sad? Not necessarily, but it will help me feel less alone. Shadow of the Colossus is my depression game. I've seen a few other people talk about their respective games, what game helps them when they're feeling sad or lost or empty. For some people, it's happy games, for others, it's scary games, and for others, it's depressing games. And while I would say Shadow of the Colossus falls into that latter category, I wouldn't say it's because the game is depressing that it helps me so much. It's actually a wide range of emotions that the game exudes that exemplifies a lot of the human emotion that I associate with my depression. So let's talk about it now. Shadow of the Colossus. I'm going to skip the story synopsis because that's not what I'm here for, but I want to talk about the Forbidden Land itself, the huge world you play in, and how actually not empty it is. I know a lot of people like to point to the Forbidden Land as a sad and lonely world that was clearly a shadow of its former self, and meant to make the player feel isolated. And while that's all certainly true, this world does not make me sad, nor does it make me feel alone. If anything, it makes me feel safe, a sense of belonging, because no, the Forbidden Land is not desolate. There are so many things living here if you look hard enough. The birds, the trees, the lizards, the fish, the turtles. There's also all sorts of fruit growing here, happy and healthy. And there's so much green. Rolling hills, forests. Yes, there are no people, but in my head there are also no people. Just me. Just the sights I see and the sounds I hear. When I'm feeling down, a place like the Forbidden Land is where I want to be, not a place I dread going to. And I know the rules of the game. I know how this works. Nothing is going to hurt me unless I actively seek it out. Unless I actively choose to fight that Colossus. Or jump off a cliff. That can hurt me too. But overall, this is a place of safety. A place of respite and contemplation. And one I'm extremely familiar with. It's my home away from home. Now, what about the colossi themselves? The fights that make up the game aspect of the game? Well, each one is different from the last, and as such, each makes me feel a different emotion, which I think is what adds to the journey of playing this game. Let's go over each one, shall we? First up is Malus, the Colossus on the box art, the one everyone recognizes most. He's the first guy you fight in the signature battle of the series. Most people associate him with a sense of scale or dread, and I don't feel that at all. I love this game, and seeing this guy for the first time doesn't fill me with any sort of loathing, but determination. His presence is one I anticipate, and honestly I almost want to get it out of the way. Get it over with so I can get to the good stuff. He's so easy to fight too, so non-threatening. Malus gets me pumped, eager, and I cheer to myself every time I bring him down because I know my adventure is just beginning, or in this case, my experiment. Next up is Quadratus, the big bull thing, and arguably the easiest fight in the whole game. This guy, he makes me bored. Yeah, I know, anticlimactic, but it's true. I get truly bored fighting this guy because it's all a matter of just going through the motions. Shoot the back foot, climb up, stab the butt, now the head, fight over. He's slow, he's non-threatening, but boredom is a part of depression. In fact, a major sign of depression is finding boredom in things that would otherwise usually excite you, and that's what Quadratus exemplifies to me. I find this mundane. This fight with the sweeping score and the exceptional presentation, this giant beast that crashes through the door at the start of the fight, it's just uneventful to me. And then there's Gaius, the first truly difficult Colossus and the one that I think has a lot to say about the way I feel when I play this game. Gaius is a jerk. Gaius is a challenge. Gaius is very frustrating to me, especially that weak spot on his stomach. You can never quite position wander right and he gets flung around so easy and this guy makes me frustrated. And again, so does depression. I get so much more easily frustrated with myself when I'm down. I get short-tempered and I feel like I'm going to snap if anyone so much as touches me until I can succeed at whatever is in front of me. And in this instance, it's Gaius. Killing him is cathartic, to say the least, because I know it's over and I know what lies ahead and how almost none of that is going to frustrate me in quite the same way Gaius did. The fourth Colossus is Phaedra, the horse Colossus. This was probably the hardest fight for me to master for the longest time. I always knew how to do it, but executing it consistently was the struggle. Because the puzzle's weird, yeah, there's no question about that. But this is also the fight where you can tell the game really wants you to feel bad for what you're doing. This is the first time where the song Creeping Shadow plays, and it's definitely the most unsettling boss theme on the entire soundtrack. It has a strange cadence to it. It's played out almost like a theme from a horror game or movie. It never reaches any real resolution. And then there's the cutscene that plays after the fight. You can tell the game wants you to feel bad for killing Phaedra, and in a way I do, but I don't think it's in the same way the game expects me to. Contrary to popular belief, Phaedra is not harmless. Not at all. She'll try to crush you and knock you around if she can, but I don't blame her, because I feel bad. I think I let her down. There's one scene in this fight that always gets me, and it isn't the act of killing her. It's how you find her, just sitting there, waiting. She's not asleep like most of the other colossi. She looks as though she was expecting something, or someone. It's that awkward pose you find her in, it just seems so out of place. And for good reason, I think. Like she was watching and waiting for someone to come around the corner, instead she was just met with you, and she wants you to go away. Again, I feel this way. I feel like an intrusion when I'm depressed. I feel like, no matter how much people say otherwise, that I'm in their way and their space, and that nobody wants me here. And I feel bad. I feel guilty. I wish I could just leave Phaedra alone now that I woke her up, but Dorman, the voice in my head, won't let me. I have to kill her. The fifth Colossus is Avion, the bird Colossus, and definitely a lot of people's pick for favorite Colossus in the game, just for the sheer fact that you're having to climb around on a giant bird while it flies through the air. And I totally get that. Avion is certainly exhilarating to fight, but for me, it again feels like the Phaedra fight. Especially now that I've mastered this fight, Avion usually takes me about 3 minutes at most to beat. And the first entire minute of that is this. That incredibly slow and awkward swim up to the platform where you have to pull out your bow and deliberately annoy the giant bird halfway across the arena. Avion seems like he wants even less to do with you than Phaedra did. Like, he doesn't even want to be around you until you provoke him. Not until you fire that arrow at him will he approach you. Not even calling or whistling will do it. I'm a pretty outgoing person sometimes, but depression just about shuts down every social skill I have. I cannot talk to strangers much at all when I get like this. I have to plug in, listen to music, do my own thing until I'm forced to. And in that regard, I feel like Wander here, but I also feel like Avion. Again, I feel sympathetic, probably even more so than I did with Phaedra. I don't want to be here. You don't want to be here. But we both have to be. Then comes one of my least favorite colossi, Barba, the big old bearded guy. However, unlike Quadratus, I find this fight more so forgettable than I do boring. Like, the fight itself is actually pretty neat. It's sort of adrenaline fueled, with a Barba actively seeking you out, trying to kill you. But he's not threatening to me, not like Gaius. He's just there. Another obstacle getting in the way of progress. I've beaten this game roughly 100 times in my life, and even now I'll still make my way to the 7th Colossus after beating Avion, completely forgetting Barba even exists until I get there. And then I gotta turn way the heck around and go after him, which sucks because they're on opposite ends of the friggin' map. I have always had an excellent memory, but for some reason everything about Barba is just unmemorable. Even now I have to remind myself it exists, and it's no fault of the designers, it's my fault. It's my own mental blockage that causes this. And again, I don't think it's a bad fight, but depression will do that. It will make you forget things that you otherwise never would. So now that we can actually go to the 7th Colossus, let's talk about him. Hydra. I know a lot of people who are genuinely afraid of this Colossus, and it makes sense. He's in water, and Shadow of the Colossus does an amazing job of creating this feeling of utter helplessness whenever Wander is in water. You're slow, awkward, and useless whenever you gotta swim, and Hydra preys on those fears. But again, I know the rules of this game, and I know he isn't just gonna come up and swallow me whole. He isn't interested in me. In fact, I don't think Hydra even knows I'm there until, oh, he sees me. But he's not going to eat me. He's just going to come have a look before going back down. The rods on his back aren't electrically charged by choice. They're electrically charged only so long as they're submerged. He isn't trying to hurt me, even though he can. And quickly, and badly. To me, Hydra's an innocent bystander, but not in the way Avion and Phaedra were. Much like those two, he's beautiful to look at, but I don't think he wants me to leave. He just wants me to keep my distance. But I can't. In a way, I have to betray him for my own sake. I have to lie. He swims up, has a look at me, and then dives back down. And just before he gets away, I grab his tail and proceed to literally stab him in the back over and over until I reach the head and finish the job. With depression, I have to be selfish sometimes if I want to get over it. I have to put myself above something else long enough to get the job done. And that's what I'm doing to Hydra. I have to betray this creature's trust because there's no way I could kill him if he wasn't so curious. Now, we've talked a lot about everyone's favorite colossi and least favorite colossi. Those colossi that make people scared and those that make people honestly thrilled to fight it. There is only one Colossus in this game that scares me, and his name is Mori, the 8th Colossus. I'm not going to say anything else, but let the visuals do the talking for a second while you see why I'm so afraid of this guy. And once it's on, he is angry. He's ugly, and he is devastating. There is literally no safe spot in this arena. Everywhere you go, there's an angle he can hit you from. Yes, even the stairs. So the key to this fight is movement. Mori may not be difficult, but he's inescapable, and you have to face him head on. But before you do that, you have to tread lightly. You have to be careful, because the second he spots you, it's a battle to the death. Every time I feel legitimate chills for beating this guy, but I also feel the legitimate exhilaration. Again, this is one of the few fights I'm actively looking forward to when I play this game, for the sake of fun and fun alone. Not to say the other fights aren't fun, because they all are, except Quadratus, but Mori's in particular stands out to me as a genuine boss battle. Basaran, on the other hand, feels like you fight him on an entirely different plane of existence. The dry lake bed where all the geysers are is shrouded in fog. The lighting in this fight is completely one of a kind. You feel cut off, isolated. And if that isn't enough, the sound design in this fight is particularly powerful. In every fight, if you make enough distance between yourself and the Colossus you're up against, the music will fade out and eventually even stop playing completely if you're far enough away. But most of the time, you don't have a choice. In this fight, it's particularly noticeable because you're on a horse, meaning it's much easier to make that distance. Not to mention, Basaran is very slow. Until you flip him over, that's probably going to happen quite a bit. This fight is just empty. Yes, I have my horse with me, but no fight does a better job of making me feel isolated, alone. Basaran is mean, but he's not particularly hard. He only has one weak spot, and once you climb on him, it's game over. But if there was ever a fight that makes it feel like it's just me versus my demons, this is the one to do it. Oh boy, alright, let's talk about anxiety for a sec. Anxiety and depression pretty much go hand in hand, there's no question about that. They both work to amplify one another, they both suck, and I think most people don't have one without the other in at least some fashion. For me, anxiety was actually the more prevalent constant between the two, but it also made my depression worse. Nowadays, I rarely deal with anxiety anymore. Those sudden, frantic moments where I feel like I've lost control, where everything's falling apart even if in the grand scheme of things it's very minimal. Again, I've just about conquered my anxiety now. It doesn't rear its ugly head anymore, but I definitely haven't forgotten it. And Dirge, the 10th Colossus, certainly helps with that. The design of this fight is to give you a Colossus that's just as fast as your horse in full gallop. There is no faster Colossus. Dirge is mean. Dirge will chase you, and Dirge feels like anxiety, like he's always right behind me. And I'm firing all I can at him to keep him at bay until he leaps out of the ground and onto me. I either swerve or I don't. But no matter what, I just have to deal with him again, over and over, until I've hit him in the eye, stabbed him in the back, and left him to wither and die. Colossus number 11, Celosia, the fire beast who's afraid of fire. Celosia stands out in a lot of people's minds as the smallest Colossus, where there's almost nothing colossal about her. But she's still no pushover. She too is fast, like Dirge, except you don't have a horse this time. But she has one big fear, and that's fire. So to beat her aggression, you gotta be the more aggressive one. You gotta turn her against herself, and in a way, I am very sympathetic of Celosia, because with depression comes fear. Comes facing those fears. Now the second half of the fight is very much just a fight. But the first half, this part right here, waving her away, cornering her until she falls over the edge, that gets me. That gets me so bad. I said it before, I've played Shadow of the Colossus over 100 times, and I'm seriously not exaggerating when I say that. It's been a lot of playthroughs, and if there's ever been a fight that I just have no idea why it was in the game, especially with all the other Colossus ideas that were scrapped, it's the 12th one, Pelagia. This fight is just... what? It feels like a fever dream from start to finish. This Colossus has no face. It has teeth on the top of its head that you hit to guide it around the arena, and then you have to lure it in and stab it in the stomach and... what? This fight is nothing short of bizarre, and hilariously enough, has more alternate ways of completing it than any other fight in the game, even if every one of them amounts to stabbing him in the stomach in the end. But it's just so out of place. It's so unsettling. That creeping shadow music is back, and usually this is the longest fight in the game too, even for the best of players. And you can't avoid it. You have to deliberately put yourself in this dark, confusing and creepy fight with almost no end in sight. Because Pelagia can be so finicky. Everything just feels off. I almost feel sick to my stomach. It's like hearing way too many of the wrong piano notes. I hope I feel better with the next one. Colossus number 13, Phalanx. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my favorite fight in the entire game. I love it more than any other, and there's a few reasons why. I mean, he's the biggest Colossus by a long shot, for one. There's this jump you have to make that's pretty amazing. The music is very fitting, and yes, all of that has something to do with it, but Phalanx is harmless. And I mean truly harmless. He's the only Colossus in the entire game that actually has no method of directly harming you. The one and only way you can be hurt in this fight is by falling. By your own mistake. He has, above all others we've faced and have yet to face, done nothing wrong. And can do nothing wrong. There's a prevailing theory that Shadow of the Colossus very much tries to make the player out to be a monster, to be the true villain of the story, or the anti-hero at the very least. I think there are plenty of arguments to be made against that claim as well, but if there was ever a case to be made for that line of thinking, this is the fight to use. It's just awful, and so beautiful at the same time. Phalanx is truly gorgeous. I could just stand there and watch him fly around for hours. He's so majestic, so awe-inspiring, and yet I have to do it. I have to kill such a wonderful creature to continue my adventure. And my stomach's doing flips now. Okay, maybe the next one will help. This used to be my favorite fight a long time ago, and it's still up there, but it's marred by one particular aspect that I'll get into a second. Colossus number 14 is Shinobi, the other small one, and the fight oft criticized for being too similar to a previous one in Celosia. Aesthetic design of the Colossus itself aside, this fight is nothing like fight number 11. The puzzle isn't the same. Shinobi is much more powerful and much more aggressive than Celosia, and just as quick. She's also bigger. And this fight just gets my adrenaline pumping. Very similar to Mori, the 8th Colossus, except that I'm not scared of Shinobi, not at all. I like playing cat and mouse with her. Heck, sometimes I like to go full Matador and simply stand around trying to dodge her oncoming attacks for fun. But no, I have a fight to win, and this fight is monotonous. Yeah, it really is. About 3/4 of this fight amounts to climbing pillars and having Shinobi knock them over, and you have to do this many times. Executing the fight is very thrilling in my opinion, but from an outsider looking in, it's easy to tell that this is possibly the most boring fight in the game. And again, depression does that. When you're deprived of all else, when you're out of energy and motivation because you just can't be bothered to care, you find yourself doing the same mundane tasks over and over again. And Cenobia's fight asks the same of you. Climb onto a pillar, piss off the lion below, she knocks it over, repeat. But at least in this fight, that monotony gets you somewhere. Eventually, you knock that armor off. You succeed. And I guess, I just wish that's how it always worked. Fight number 15, the second to last battle in the entire game, and my least favorite fight in the whole game for a number of reasons. In a lot of ways, I think this is also the most poorly designed fight, but I also think that that is on purpose. Oh, Argus. This douchebag can choke, and there are a number of reasons why. Now, this fight is not actually poorly executed. Getting Argus to do the things you want him to do is actually a very simple process. It's just tedious. Stand on the platform, have him step on it to boost you up. Tick him off so he'll knock down the next set of platforms for you. Climb all the way up, tick him off again so he'll break the bridge. Now you can finally climb onto him. Oh, you fell? Oh, well, guess you gotta do all that over again. It's so tedious. It's not bad. It's not particularly hard if you're patient either. In fact, a lot of fights in this game are tedious, but most of them are so short that the feeling of monotony never really hits you. Like with Cenobia. Even if you fell, you could still pick up from where you left off. But this fight? Nope. It's so arduous and long that it's just frustrating, and it builds off of that last fight. Cenobia was almost a fantasy in monotony, that low effort actually getting you somewhere. Argus is the opposite of that. It's the reality of monotony, and it's just difficult enough of a fight that you have to make a pretty active effort to break out of it, to succeed. When you take out that weak spot on his head and knock the cleaver out of his hands, you finally feel free. You finally feel like you've gotten somewhere. Then it's all a matter of finishing the job. And now, the last fight. The 16th and final Colossus, Malus. What can be said about Malus? I'm sure you've heard it before. Malus is swift and brutal, but he's just trying to keep you away. He's scared, he's defenseless, and he's practically helpless once you reach him. I don't see that at all. Malus is depression in its purest form. He represents everything about it. Depression is just there. It's stoic, it looms over you, it's huge, and in the distance it seems overwhelming, daunting even. And every time it hits you hard. It's not that you can't get up, you don't want to get up. That's what I see in Wander every time one of these blasts hits him. Not physical paralysis, but emotional paralysis. That bullet hurt him so badly he doesn't want to continue. But eventually he does. You do. You keep going. That's not how depression is conquered though. The act of continuing on is not what beats it. It's only step 1. Step 2 is the climb. Step 2 is tackling every individual obstacle, stabbing your way through every obstacle, using depression to your advantage. You don't just push through it, you fight it. And when you grab depression by the hair and watch it squirm, you stab. You stab and you stab until it can't fight back anymore, and you beat it. Many people view the ending of Shadow of the Colossus as melancholy, symbolic, or just a sad reminder of how Wander's efforts were futile, or how he was the villain. But he does end up restoring his loved one. She comes back, even after he dies. But none of that matters to me. There's only one prevailing thought I have whenever I see this ending. When I see all of the destruction I've caused, all the lives I've taken, and all the damage I've done, while the best credits theme ever plays. What if Wander's intentions weren't noble? Or heroic? What if he really didn't care about his loved one that much? What if she wasn't a loved one at all? What if his actual reasoning was because he valued himself so little? Less than that of Mono, the woman on the altar. What if instead of believing that Mono was so important he'd give his life for her, he actually thought she was just important enough that throwing his life away for her sake would at least give it some meaning? What if it was some promise to her loved one? What if that was the real reason? Some would argue that nobody would have the resolve to go that far, to take this long, drawn-out, suicidal path that Wander's taking to make his life worth something that I am implying. But perhaps that's why why this game has such a firm grasp on depression, and why it understands the emotions associated with it so well, why it feels so close to home for me. Shadow of the Colossus is my depression game, not because it's depressing, but because it understands depression. It evokes these emotions and these feelings without saying a word, and yet it helps me feel safe, secure, and understood, and that's why I love it so much. It isn't a cure, it isn't an escape, it isn't a distraction. It's a few hours with an old friend who's willing to hear me out and tell me what I'm feeling, who's willing to help me get through these things. I do hope that not once throughout this video I made it seem as though I wasn't taking depression seriously, because I do. I know what it's like to suffer through it. I know how difficult it can get. And to those of you watching who also suffer from depression, you have my deepest sympathies. It's hard, I know. Unbelievably and indescribably hard. But it's always possible to get through it, no matter the circumstances. Every smile that will ever crease your face, every moment that will ever bring you joy, every opportunity you will ever have for love and happiness in your future is worth going forward. Worth pushing on, no matter how dim the light at the end of the tunnel may be. Because that light is there, no matter how well the darkness that is depression attempts to hide it.